6th of July, 3rd Sunday after Trinity. Sermon on 2 Kings, chapter 5, verses 1 to 14. When I was 5 years old, I had a wonderful teacher at school called Miss Mellor. She was young and pretty and kind, a great recommendation, and she was gifted at telling stories, especially Bible stories. I've no idea if Miss Mellor was a Christian, but she told the stories as if she believed them to be true, and she convinced me of their value. Probably more than any other person in my early life, Miss Mellor set me on the path to belief in and love of God. The account from our lectionary reading today from the second book of Kings reminded me of Miss Mellor because I remember her telling us this story, and I want to pay tribute to her and recall once again with gratitude her skill in storytelling. This story concerns a little Israelite girl who'd been taken captive during a raid and made a slave to the wife of the military leader to the king of Aram, Israel's enemy. The military leader's name was Naaman. He was highly regarded by the king and a brave soldier, but he had leprosy. One might expect the little slave girl to think, serve him right. But instead she was sorry for him, and she told her mistress that if Naaman would go to the prophet who was in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy. This prophet was Elisha, who had continued the ministry of Elijah. Samaria was the capital of the northern kingdom of Israel, and Elisha was noted for his powerful works in his service of the Lord. Naaman asked permission from the king, who gave him a letter for the king of Israel, and Naaman set off with lavish gifts and an entourage of chariots and horses. When he arrived at Elisha's house, Elisha sent out a message saying, "Go, wash yourself 7 times in the river Jordan, and your flesh will be restored, and you will be cleansed." This is where the story seems to go wrong. It may have been that Elisha didn't want to approach a leper. The law of Israel had strict rules about leprosy and other diseases. Or he may not have been impressed with the chariots and horses parked outside his front door. Whatever the reason, his peremptory means of dealing with Naaman was taken as an insult. I thought he would surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, wave his hand over the spot and cure me of my leprosy, he complained. Furthermore, why the river Jordan? Weren't the rivers of his own land better than any waters of Israel? Naaman was used to deference. He'd arrived with a degree of pomp, and he was very offended. In addition, he had expected his healing to require ceremony, ritual, not a dip in the river. He went off in a rage. Fortunately, Naaman's servants were more sensible. They didn't expect to be treated with deference or ceremony, and they clearly thought Naaman was being petty, which he was. They reasoned with him. If the prophet had given him a difficult task, he would have done it. How much more then, when he was simply told to wash in order to be cleansed? So Naaman capitulated, dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan, and his flesh was restored like that of a young boy. The physical healing of Naaman was wonderful, but a greater healing took place. Naaman returned to Elisha, who received him this time, and he declared, "Now I know there is no God in all the world except in Israel." He offered Elisha the gifts he'd brought, 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. But Elisha refused. All he had wanted was to demonstrate God's power. However, Naaman asked for one favour. He wanted a consignment of earth from Israel, as much as 2 mules could carry, to take home, for he promised that he would never worship any other god but the Lord. and he wanted to worship on the Lord's own ground. As a 5-year-old, what impressed me most from this story was the faith and compassion of the little slave girl. She'd been snatched from her home and family, a frightening prospect, but she'd offered her faith with no thought of reward for the healing of her mistress's husband, probably the very man who'd caused her to be captured. 70 years on, my focus is different, though I still appreciate what that little girl did. What impresses me now is the simplicity of Naaman's healing, so different from his expectations. This story is a microcosm of the way in which God saves, by grace. We tend to expect the process of salvation to be long and arduous. Then perhaps we can claim some of the credit. The simplicity of it often puts people off. Is that all that is needed? We probably all know of churches that beset themselves with rules and rituals. You can't take communion if you don't. You can't be baptized unless. You have to do this. You mustn't wear that. And then as individuals we set our own rules to judge ourselves and others. I spent the first 41 years of my life under the misapprehension that I needed to perform works and keep rules to get to heaven. I needed to go to church every week. I needed to be good. Learning about grace, that Jesus died to enable me to enter God's presence, that all I needed was faith, was a life-changing experience, just like Naaman, who found that dipping himself in the Jordan healed his body. A few weeks ago, we had the story of the jailer in Philippi, who discovered that all he needed to do to be saved was to believe on the Lord Jesus. God's grace is hiding in plain sight. It is the fault of churches if it is not declared clearly and persistently enough. There's also the response of Elisha, who just wanted to prove that there was a prophet in Israel and to give God the glory. He was not impressed with Naaman's status or wealth, and nor did he accept his gift. We're told that he said, "As surely as the Lord lives, I will not accept a thing." And even though Naaman urged him, he refused. I don't remember all those details from the story that Miss Mellor told us. It was years before I came to appreciate the simplicity of God's dealings with us, his gift of grace. Salvation from sin and death, far more important than healing from any disease, is free. Like Elisha, no one should take payment for helping someone to receive it. It's a gift from God, ready to be accepted. That is all that is required. It is even easier than a dip in the River Jordan.